Hi guys, it's Lindsay. Welcome back to The Wandering Reader. Today I'm going to be talking about my January book wish list. This is a series that I started on my channel towards the end of 2017, and it's a video series where I talk to you every month about books that I have added to my Amazon wish list. So there are 16 books that I want to talk to you about today. I cannot believe how many great booktube videos have gone up over the last month or so, including everyone's favourite books of 2017 videos. So many good recommendations, and I can't wait to jump in and talk to you about all the books that I've put on my wish list this month. So the first of those is Once Upon a Time in the North, and this is by Philip Pullman. I saw this book on April Sarah's December mid-month wrap-up, and she talked about the fact that this is a His Dark Materials novella. I'd never heard of this novella before, so immediately she said that, I added it to my wish list because my husband is a great fan of the His Dark Materials series, and I recently reread Northern Lights, so I thought it would be really perfect to pick this up at some point, perhaps when I have finished the original trilogy. I'm not really sure where to slot it into that, and give this one a go. The next one that I want to talk about is The Indifferent Stars Above, and this is by Daniel James Brown. Now, Katie from Life Between Words, when I emailed her to ask her for a book recommendation for my Booktuber Recommends project, she recommended two, and this was the second one. The other one went obviously in the jar. And this is a non-fiction book which I believe tells the story of the Donner Party, and I'd never heard of this story before. But from what I can gather from the premise, it talks about the fact that they were making a journey from Illinois to California, and they got to the Sierra Nevada mountains where it was really heavily snowing, and the way ahead of them was sort of shut. And the party got to the point where they were really hungry and really desperate, so they made their way through this really heavy snowfall and through these mountains anyway. So and from what I can gather, it's going to be like quite a hard-hitting, tragic story. Like I said, I've never heard of this particular moment in history before, but Katie recommended it, and I really want to pick that up at some point. Next up, I want to talk about the book Sold by Patricia McCormack, and I saw this book on Jess McGlynn's December book haul, and what intrigued me about this was what she said about the writer, and it says that Patricia McCormack is an award-winning writer and journalist. She travelled to India and Nepal for her research, where she interviewed the women of Calcutta's red light district and girls who have been rescued from the sex trade, and I believe this novel is going to be sort of centred around some of her research and her findings, and I think that particular topic is so important to read about, but also obviously because she's travelled there and she's done so much research into it, I think it sounds like it's going to be sort of a a well-researched book, shall we say, and a really good story, and I'm looking forward to checking that one out. The next one that I want to talk about is called Three Souls, and this is by Janie Chang, and I heard about this on Kate Phil's Currently Reading a Library Haul, and she talked about the fact that this is one of her favourite books of all time, and that she was rereading it in December, and she likes to reread it I think every year, just because obviously she loves it so much. I'd never heard of this book before, so I looked it up on Amazon, and the premise sounds really good. So it says, "We have three souls, or so I'd been told, but only in death could I confirm this. So begins the haunting and captivating tale, set in 1935 China, of the ghost of a young woman named Layin, who watches her own funeral from above and wonders why she's being denied entry to the afterlife. Beside her are three souls, stern and scholarly Yang, impulsive romantic Yin, and wise shining Hun, who will guide her toward understanding. She must, they tell her, make amends." So there's a little bit more to it than that, I think, because Kate said it was her favourite book and I'd never heard of it before. I was really interested in checking it out. The next one I've got on my list is a book called Civilianized by Eric Silver, and this is a non-fiction book that I heard about from Roya Eve Reads, and this was on her top books of 2017 list, and I thought the topic of this particular non-fiction book was something that I was really interested in checking out. So this is about someone called Michael Anthony, and it says after 12 months of military service in Iraq, he stepped off a plane seemingly happy to be home, or at least back on US soil. He was 21, a bit of a nerd, and carrying a pack of cigarettes that he thought would be his last. 2 months later, Michael was stoned on Vicodin, drinking way too much and picking a fight with a very large Hells Angel. At his wit's end, he came to an agreement with himself. If things didn't improve in 3 months, he was going to kill himself. Civilianised is a memoir chronicling Michael's search for meaning in a suddenly destabilised world. And that sort of topic of soldiers coming back from war and having to deal with the normal world, as it were, is something that really interests me. And like I said, Roya Eve, she talked about the fact that this was on her favourites list, so I really want to check it out. Next up is another non-fiction book, and it's called American Fire, and this is by Monica Hesse. And I heard about this on My Reading Life's December wrap-up part 1, and I quite liked the idea behind this one. It says it's a mesmerising, crucial panorama with nationwide implications. American Fire asks what happens when a community gets left behind. Hesse brings to life the Eastern Shore and its inhabitants, battling a punishing economy and increasingly terrified by a string of fires they could not explain. The result evokes the soul of rural America, a land half gutted before the fires even began. And just reading a bit more about America is something that I'm really interested in doing, and kind of getting to know some of the backgrounds and some of the social and cultural things behind some of the communities in America. I'm really interested in getting to know that a little bit better, so this one sounds like it will be something for me. Next up on my list is a book called City of Masks, and this is by Mary Hoffman, and this was on Elliot Brooks' favourite YA books of 2017. And if you know Elliot, she reads a lot of YA and adult fantasy, so I really trust her opinion when it comes to different fantasy recommendations. And this is, I believe, the start of a series, and what intrigued me about this one is that it's set in 16th century Italy. So the backdrop, you don't, well, I've not really come across a lot of fantasy, or people talk about a lot of fantasy that have got that kind of backdrop to it, and that really intrigued me. And there's this little quote from the premise that sounds really good. So it says, the city of Bellezza, which is Venice in our world, is astonishingly evoked with a filmic eye to detail, from the sensuousness of silks and velvets to the thrill and danger of assassination attempts, both foiled and successful, and that really interests me. So if Elliot said it was good, then I definitely want to check it out. Next up, I want to talk about The Veins of the Ocean, and this is by Patricia Engel, and I saw this book on Max from Well Done's books, favourite books of 2017. He hasn't been on BookTube for a little while now, and he put a couple of videos up at the end of the year, and it was so great to see him back. I always really trust his recommendations. I think he reads a lot of literary fiction, but some other things as well, and he's just so articulate when it comes to talking about books that he likes and doesn't like, and kind of the reasons why. So like I said, this was on his favourite books of 2017 list, and I'll read you the blurb because it sounds really cool. It says, Raina Castillo's beloved brother is serving a death sentence for a crime that shocked the community, a crime for which Raina secretly blames herself. When she's at last released from her 7-year prison vigil, Raina moves into a sleepy town in the Florida Keys, seeking anonymity. There she meets Nesto, a recently exiled Cuban awaiting with hope the arrival of the children he left behind in Havana. Through Nesto's love of the sea and capacity for faith, Raina comes to understand her own connections to the life-giving and destructive forces of the ocean that surrounds her, as well as its role in her family's troubled history. Set in the vibrant coastal and Caribbean communities of Miami, the Florida Keys, Havana, Cuba, and Cartagena, Colombia, The Veins of the Ocean is a wrenching exploration of what happens when life tests the limits of compassion, and a stunning and unforgettable portrait of fractured lives finding solace in the beauty and power of the natural world and in one another. So I think that sounds really cool. Next up, I want to talk about The Attack, and this is by Yasmina Kadra, and Derby from Derby Lane Reading. She chose this as her booktuber recommends pick but I'd kind of already filmed the video, so I didn't include it, but I put it on my wish list anyway because it sounds really cool. And the bit that intrigued me about this was from the graphic, shocking description of the bombing that opens the novel to its searing conclusion, the attack portrays the reality of terrorism and its costs. Intense and humane, thoughtful, sensitive and heartfelt, it displays a profound understanding of that which can seem incomprehensible. It's a really relevant topic to right now, and Debbie said it was one of those books that she knew nothing about when she picked it up and then was totally blown away by it. So yeah, I really trust her recommendation there. Next up, I want to talk about The Complete Mouse, and this is by Art Spiegelman, and I heard Vicky from Chapter 32 talking about this in her Best Books of 2017 video. It is a graphic novel series that I have heard people talk about before. I'm pretty sure that Krista from Books and Jams read it and really liked it, but I didn't have it on my wish list, so I added it when I heard Vicky talking about it. And this is a Pulitzer Prize winning Holocaust survivor story. But I believe the Jewish people are mice in it. Am I wrong about that? Yeah, the Nazis are cats and the Jews are mice. The author, Art Spiegelman, he's telling the story of his father and how he survived the Holocaust, I believe. So yeah, I've heard amazing things about it, so I thought it was high time I added it to my wish list. The next one I have to talk to you about is Dear Friend, From My Life I Write to You in Your Life, and this is by Yi-Yun Lee. And I heard about this book on Eric Carl Anderson's Best Books of 2017 list. And this one is a memoir, I believe. And it says here, startlingly original and shining with quiet wisdom, this is a memoir of a life lived with books. Written over 2 years while the author battled suicidal depression, Dear Friend is a painful and richly affirming examination of what makes life worth living. Lee confronts the two most essential questions of her identity: why write and why live? And the fact that it's kind of interwoven with this idea of her favourite books and things like that, and the fact that it's also talking about mental illness, just immediately made me think that I want to read it. The next book that I want to talk about is The Castaways, and this is by Jessica Fleck. And I heard about this on Sarah from Sarah's Nightstand channel. This was on her Best Books of 2017, but the runner-up list, so she did 2 separate videos, the best of and then like a runner-up list for 2017, and this is on the, like I said, on the runner-up list. And this is, I believe, a fantasy story, and I don't know whether it's the start of a series. I can't remember what she said about that, but it's about a girl called Olive, and she goes to this infamous corn maze, and when she runs into the maze she wakes up on an isolated and undetectable island. So it seems like it's going to intrigue me because it's obviously set on a sort of desert island, as it were. It seems like it's going to be sort of like a survival story, but it's also going to have some fantasy elements in there as well, and Sarah said that she obviously really enjoyed it, so I want to pick it up. Next up I want to talk about a book called On Writing by A.L. Kennedy, and I got an email from Penguin and it had an article within the email talking about brilliant books to start your new year with. This is obviously a non-fiction book talking about, you know, how to write and that, you know, how to start the creative writing process and things like that. So it's another one that I kind of added to my list of books to pick up and check out if I want to do some writing in the future. The next book on my list is The Goshawk, and this is by T.H. White, and when I did my December book haul I hauled H is for Hawk by Helen MacDonald, and in the comments of that video On the Stoop recommended reading this book first because he said that H is for Hawk references this book quite a lot and that it would, I don't know, aid my understanding or make the reading experience a lot better, so I added it to my wish list for that reason. Next up on my list is The Ghostwriter, and this is by Alexandra Torre. And I added this one to my list because I finished her Deanna Madden trilogy earlier this month, and I was having a little look on her website about some of the other books that she's written, and this is one that she has recently released, and it's another sort of thriller, as it were, or it might be romantic thriller, I don't really know, but the premise sounded really interesting. So it says, I had 3 months to write the last book of my life, 3 months to confess the details of that day and how it changed everything for me. My name is Helena Ross. I've written 15 romance novels, 10 of which have become international bestsellers, but this one isn't a romance. This novel holds only the truth which I've run away from for 4 years. The truth which I have hidden from the police, from my family, from the world. This final book, it's my confession. So the Deanna Madden series were sort of erotic thrillers, and this one sounds like it's going to be a thriller too. So I loved the Deanna Madden series, so I'm really interested in checking this one out. And the last book that I have to talk to you about today is Mummon's Homesick Pie, and this is by Tanya Bajan. Tanya Bajan wrote The Last Days of Cafe Layla, and I was having a little look at what else she'd written, and this was the first book that she brought out, and this is a memoir. It's her memoir, and it talks about, she writes about her life, the fact that she moved from Iran to California quite early on in her life. It talks about the fact that she's a chef, and I believe she was trained at the Cordon Bleu in Paris. And yeah, there's lots of things in here that really intrigue me. I just want to find out more about her life, because I love The Last Days of Cafe Layla. Yeah, and I'm just really intrigued to read a bit more about her, really. So there you go, guys. They were all the books that I added to my wish list during the month of January, or in between the last book wish list and this one. I'd love to have a chat with you in the comments below. Have you read any of these? What did you think of them? But also, what sort of books have come onto your radar in the last month that you're really interested in picking up? Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.